Hello there, and warm welcome back to Beyond the Norm, the first episode of 2026. About time, says you. Um, it has been a different type of winter for me, where I have rested, been present, and stopped that need to push or produce. And I think so often in this world, we feel we are what we do or we don't do. And that's why this subject matter today around transitions is going to be so interesting. So often, when we feel stuck or we want this move to happen, it's not happening fast enough. We want to get to point B quicker. There comes with huge judgment, a huge internalization, huge comparisons. We're going to look at it in the context of you and your systems and what you are internalizing, what you believe to be true, but also mostly, which I think many of you want from this, is how do you take the next step? And so often in a transition, we want the clear path and the most obvious thing, and that is not always possible. Anyway, the episode is going to help you, hopefully, with that. And this episode is also going to be followed by a body scan, a very heart centered, where I see heart coherence as the number one thing to get through these times of transition, these times of rapid change and rapid pace, which feels very unhuman and outer body for many people. How do we come back to ourselves? So this episode will be swiftly followed by that body scan, and I really hope that you take the time and make the space to listen to that, especially when that uncertainty, chaos, confusion, all those things we're going to talk about right now come in. So I hope you enjoy the episode. I hope you take the time to listen, whether that's on a drive, on a plane, on a bus, train, out for a walk, wherever that is. I have to give a trigger warning. I have a voice that is quite grounding, and it can make people quite hypnotic or put them to sleep. So I'd rather that you, if this is a topic that is really important for you, please don't take me to bed with you, and enjoy it where you can really, really digest and take it in parts. The great thing about listening to this is take it in stages, but you are very welcome here. And let's get into the topic. So, the most obvious thing in this period of time is really allowing for the fact that acknowledging that you're in a transition. Call it out. I think it's the first thing that, I remember Googling the word transition back in the day, like transition groups, like people that were in this transition, because it wasn't a word, where people wanted to get promoted or people wanted to move on internally. There was this dearth of information around transitions. And the one thing that I did learn when I went to seek out, what other people were going through, that the minute that I named that this was a transition and it wasn't obvious, was something in my nervous system settled. So even if your transition plan is for 5, 6, 7 years' time, your transition probably has started. The fact that you have this desire for change on some level, that, and I particularly talk to the people who are potentially in a corporate existence that are like, I actually can't do this for any longer, or I'm in a company that I know I do not want to retire here. I do not want to stay. There's something else that I haven't pursued that I'd like to pursue in my career. And bearing in mind, for many of you who probably there's a mix of, so I'm 48 this year, so there's probably people that are 10 years younger than me listening in that bracket. And then there's people in another group that are 10 years older. And a lot of my clients hit that kind of either 10 years younger or 10 years older. And I think we are going to have long, varied careers. And this idea that we would stay in any one thing or any one organization, we all know that not to be true now. So this need that we have to, and I'm going to say classic friend word, pivot, a Ross word, the fact that we want more from our lives, that we are looking for purpose. This feels different to the generation that went before us. And I'm talking about a generation that are possibly maybe 15, 20 years older than us, not even our parents' generation, but even slightly younger than that, that were more accepting of what they had. I heard a great interview by a public servant, a guard, during the week, that when he went to get a job in the 80s, it was either like you either got the boat to England or you went to New York. And if you had any desire to stay at home, the only jobs were like firemen, Garda, and like that was his fate. It was like, if I want to stay, I gotta do these jobs. We have such an overwhelming choice now that actually in its own way is crippling. But also bear in mind the system that we came from, which was schooling and university, and even any of us that had a point system, whether that was the Leaving Cert, the CEO, or even those that are older, like the matric, and all those kind of grade relevant choices that we had for our career, that you're forced into thinking that you have to make the right move. This idea of we're really, really biased to getting it right. And let me tell you, that is something that is going to get in the way of whatever transition that you want, because transitions are not obvious, not clear, and cause great confusion. And, I'll tell parts, and so often many of you know parts of these stories, but even these are reflections that have had even in the last few weeks, because I've taken the time to really enjoy winter and use this as a reflection time. I've been reflecting on, like, I can't really believe that I'm still doing what I said I wanted to do. I didn't even have any plan really beyond the initial phase. But anyway, we'll talk about that again. Um, the first thing that is the most obvious thing in the transition is this idea of confusion. And this is something I want to name, because I don't think a lot of people talk about this confused state. I could do this and I could do that. And maybe if I tried this, and that, the overarching sense that is left within your body, within your mind in particular, is confusion and overwhelm. And what happens when we get confused and overwhelmed is a few variety of different things depending on your coping or your armor, as Brené Brown talks about. Like, what's your armor when things don't go your way? And what I see is a lot of people numbing out, and they do it by scrolling. And I include myself into this as a coping mechanism. We numb, we withdraw, we go quiet. Some people get angry, their frustration lashes out to the people that they love. And a lot of it is stemming back to this piece of confusion, that there is no clarity. So just sit with your reflection on, in the transition phase, where are you at? Like, what is the predominant feeling that keeps coming up? Because I think that's really, really important to name it and also acknowledge it. And also, there's a cost. And the confusion, sometimes in naming it, we allow it to land and acknowledge where it is in our body. So often, when we're really judging it, I should be better. Look at her, look at him. He's got all this figured out. And the reality is, that is not true. It's not true. Like, there's this perception that people have it figured out. I think there might be this perception that you think I figured shit out. I haven't figured shit out. It really is owning and calling out this confusion, this numbing, this inertia, or the stuckness is another one. Like, like, embrace what that feels in your body, because you're carrying it anyway. But it's like, okay, just place a name on it. So why transitions feel so unsettling is, by the very nature of Western society, what we do is representative of who we are. Now, you and I logically know that that's bullshit and it's not true. But the reality is, we do give great value on, and we hold value, but not only us, our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles. Like, what you did was who you were. And especially, I talked about there about servants in particular, like, it was more than a job, it was an absolute way of life. Um, I buried a beautiful and profound aunt, my beautiful Auntie Kay, just over a week ago. and she was a nurse, and that was her core identity in her family, was who she was as a nurse. And I see other cousins of mine that are nurses, that it takes over such a huge part of your identity, that when we're in transition, we wonder who we are if we're not this role. So hence why that could be so unsettling. And your role mightn't be, as something as central as that, a Chandler style of role of like, my family don't actually even know what I do. So, I'm not as tied up with my identity on my role, but there's this perception of, oh, you're one, or you're a man with the big job. And that in itself is like our systemic view on ourselves. I definitely, like, for years, I think my parents used to say she works for Nokia, but most people heard that it was Vodafone. So I would get a lot of queries about people's mobile phones that were related to the network and not to the mobile device, because they didn't know the difference between Nokia was the manufacturer and Vodafone was the network. But to, those, oh, but your daughter now has that big job in Dublin, that kind of perception of when, and I see it with redundancy in particular, I see it like across the board, like when I lose the role or I leave the company, who am I now? Belonging is what's behind a lot of that. Like when I have a role and I can name it, well, then I have a place and I belong. And it's definitely something that I probably didn't even talk about so much when I left. But like, I had that true grief, that real sense of like, who am I now if I don't belong to a big organization? I remember in between really leaving consumer brands, which are like were my Nokias and my Bacardis and my Jack Daniels and all the big brands that I worked for, I had a brief period of time in a startup. And I remember making phone calls, um, like saying who I was and who I worked for, and how it just had just never landed. Like, they didn't really give a shit of who you were. And not only with the startup was just like the least steadiest ground I needed at the time. I was I mid 30s or so, and I knew I wanted a mortgage, and like I wanted a family, and like this was not giving me up. But this identity piece, I'd always worked for big brands. I was always able to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, it's Norma from Nokia. Hi, it's Norma from Jameson. Hi, it's Norma from Bacardi." Like, I always worked for these massive, significant brands, that I had this identity crisis of who I belonged to. And that was really, 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 really unsettling. And that's why I ran back to the big corporate brands, because I wanted to be part of something that was known and valued. And when I stepped out on my own, it wasn't as hard the second time, because I started devaluing, what it was. It was like I more started seeing the cost associated being with the bigger brands. And it was like my name was enough, actually. Like, I didn't have to say who I was, or where, like, I'm Norma O'Kelly. This is what I do, as opposed to what I'm part of. But certainly there is, for people who have been with big brands and big companies, um, this idea of being not part of a team. I think COVID really was my brilliant transition, in that, I remember saying to a coach years ago, when I wanted to go out on my own, I was like, I'm going to be really lonely. Like, I live on my own. Like, I'd be working for myself. I wouldn't be meeting anyone all day. And I think COVID really helped me reframe that I was actually absolutely fine, because I had a very fulfilled life outside of my work, and I was meeting my swim women. I was meeting, colleagues from work. And I kind of knew that this whole idea of like, really, who was I actually seeing Monday to Friday? I was working, and being self-employed is no different. Yes, I was in offices. Yes, there was a bit of banter, but like, again, the costs started to be getting too big. So when the roles fall away, our system destabilizes. We're wondering, like, who am I now, and what this belongs at? And I think it's that idea that it's not just you that's changing, but like all the systems around you are changing. And I think that's what we're experiencing now, that is making the desire to transition even bigger for so many people. So, in this age of AI, in this time of huge, fast pace, it's not that you're just changing, everything is changing around you. And I think that is where the confusion comes from. That's where the overwhelm comes from. So I also see it in people who, whether they become a parent, even a grandparent, I see all kind of different cycles of life, that the one change, or even the loss of a parent, a loss of a child, or a cancer diagnosis for themselves or somebody they love, we start questioning everything. And that's that systemic change that's happening all around us. We are given perspective. We know we want something different. And it is from this point that we start exploring. So the one thing that happens, I think, again in the transition, and it definitely was my early days, and this was pre any of my systemic work, I really revered my thinking, my beliefs, some of my values, even that were questionable, that I've definitely changed. And the mind is things that the mind loves. The mind loves certainty. It loves timelines. It loves guarantees. It's so funny. I was at something yesterday, and we were talking about the promise that we give to our clients. And one woman said, "Well, actually, for me, a promise is a guarantee." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" I was like, "Absolutely not! In my mind, can a promise be a guarantee? Because a promise and is co-created. It needs to be two people, especially when in a coach-client relationship, and it can only be as good as what both parties are doing or getting involved in." And I thought, um, how for that person, the guarantee piece was really, really big, but the weight that she put on herself to give somebody a guarantee, and that is in a service industry, absolutely impossible. Um, there's so much that we don't have control over. And when it comes to transitions, there is zero guarantee. I have clients right now who are applying for big jobs in maybe tech or AI companies, and they're checking out the stock markets, and they're worried about the Orange Man in the White House, and they are definitely trying to look at all these guarantees that if I choose X company, that I'm going to be safe for a few years. And I have to remind them there is absolutely no guarantee. And all that you can go on at a specific time is your trust in is the trust that you have in your own mind, heart, and head, the three areas that you make decisions from. If you have two out of the three, let's say I could belong here for a little bit, I could do this work for a little bit, I think I like my manager, you got to take that next action. There is zero guarantee in a transition, whether it's the next job or the next one after that. There is zero guarantee, like zero. I had zero guarantee that what I decided to do would be 3 years ago. This time, 3 years ago, I knew I wanted gone. Like that was it. Like I had known for years, but I wasn't able to act on it. And this was that year, 2023. It was happening, hell or high water. I'd had my hysterectomy in January 2022. I'd done the healing, I'd done the therapy. I was so ready, and it was going to happen. And but did I have any guarantee that it was going to work? Absolutely not. I had 1 year's salary, and I was going to live from that. No matter what happened, I would do that year, and I wouldn't have regrets. That was the outcome I didn't want. I just didn't want a regret. And when I think about that now, what a shitty outcome I wanted, that I didn't want to have regret that I didn't try this thing, as opposed to, oh, actually, it could be really successful, or it could be this. Like when I think about how I started it now, like I'm judging myself here, so I will take a step back and go, but I still, like, I really, really had no plan beyond the first year. Like I had zero plan beyond the first year. I never knew what it would turn out to be. In fact, this time last year, I didn't have a clue what would happen. Even last year was so uncertain, um, that I was transitioning within my transition. Um, the transition just will not guarantee you certainty. It will not give you a guaranteed timeline. It just won't. So know that to be true. And I know I feel, I'm bringing humor into this, and it's very serious, but I really need to hold this lightly for you, because if you're certainly needing those things, you're weighing up the idea, maybe actually what is really important to me here. Is it the freedom I desire, or is it the guarantee and stability that I need? Because sometimes there's something beautiful in between. It is not the polarity of either. um but if you're caught in your head, which a lot of this thinking is, this certainty, this logic, this data points, it will be really, really, really hard to move. So we're going to start coming back into our body, starting to finding where the tension is, what's going on. So the next part of this is owning without blaming. So much of my transition was I want to move away from this because I've had enough of that and I want to move to point here. And within that, I might have placed a lot of blame on, well, the system's changing and, it's not this and it's not why, when actually it was way more about my desire for freedom. It was way more about that. And the more time that I took away that blame and started taking the power back, and a really, really good friend of mine, after I came back after my mom had died and I was so disheartened and I really didn't want to be in the company, I was giving all my power away to the company, that they had this power over me and that I didn't have choices. And I will never forget, it was the best coaching conversation. And she is a coach. And she was just like, take your power back. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. That's it. And it was something in that conversation that it was like, well, I want to be a coach. Well, then be the coach you want to be. Stop calling myself a marketeer after that. I introduced myself in really big marketing meetings as an internal coach. I was like, well, I'm going to be what I want to be. That's it. Like, I'm not going to wait for somebody to give me the title. I'm just going to embody that. So the blame really keeps you powerless. So it's like, I don't want to work for my boss. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And this is like, the golden handcuffs is a great one. And that is a type of blame. And yes, but it's also, think of that metaphor. Like, it's so powerful. You're literally in your mind's eye, in your heart, you're saying, somebody has my hands. And the reality is, I'm going to call absolute bullshit on that. They don't. You have chosen that money, which can buy you a type of freedom or a type of stability at that time, is what you need. And that is absolutely legit. You have a need. You're a parent. You have a mortgage. You have responsibilities. But don't give your power away and say it is a golden handcuff, because that is the one that really, really, really takes all your power away. You've way more choice than you think you do. And I do think, again, we're looking at the system and the lens of Europe, where we're so heavily reliant on these corporates that we feel like, if they pulled out of Ireland or the UK or Europe, how powerless we would be. And and there has to be, on some level, what am I capable of that is beyond any of this? Like, beyond any of this place. So this idea of taking your own choice back, what is possible when you start feeling empowered? When you start feeling that I have a choice again, because you got to resource yourself for getting back to that place and not feeling so powerless. So a lot of us have this bias when it comes to our lives, and we're really, really biased to action or productivity or this idea of needing to move forward and with speed. And there's something that nature can teach us, especially now. And I've recorded this in January 2026. We are still in what is called dream time. And the bulbs and the majority of the growth is happening underneath the soil. It is not happening above the soil, or if it is, it's just starting that true growth. And before any of the bulbs were even taking source, they were in pause mode. The trees have zero leaves on them right now. This idea that the system needs to pause and take the time before action comes. So we have decided in our Western society brain that this stillness somehow is a failure. If I'm not moving forward, if I'm not progressing, well, then I'm, again, this comparative stuff of I'm not winning at life. I haven't mastered. I don't even know what it is I want to transition to. So that's inaction. And on some level, I must be a failure. So what would your body think about a transition if you've already decided to tell it it's a failure? Like, think about that. It's bullshit. You'd never, ever, ever dare walk towards something if you've already decided that you failed before you even have begun. There's something in the reframe of the pause and the inaction and the reflection, or if it's forced even. I see this with redundancies or long-term unemployed, or something where they took some time out and now they're ready to go. And because they've decided that they need to go and the pace isn't happening enough, that on some level they've decided I'm a failure. And another thing that we correlate failure to is our bank balance. And this one I'm familiar with. Well, I'm not earning money, so I'm a failure. I actually think on some level I'm going to die if I don't have enough. And again, the mind is on overdrive, as opposed to I've been given this gift of time to reflect on what comes next and what would good look like. And yes, sometimes that time might feel like it's dragging on, but it really is on some level. If you can include it, the fear will exist, the scarcity mindset might exist, but on some ways it is also a gift. And you have to see it like that. In a world where chaos and speed is predominant, you're getting this chance to redesign your life again. And thankfully, so many of the tools that you need to design your life are absolutely free. Whether it's YouTube, whether it's Spotify, whether it's podcasts, not just mine. There's thousands of podcasts that can support you, books, ways of meeting people. I think the most underused tool right now, and I say to so many people that feel they're caught in this place of inertia, is go and meet your network for a cuppa online if you can't meet them in person. You have to reconnect with where are they now, people. Like, oh my God, I loved working with Mary a few years ago. And I think she went out on her own or she did something. Maybe I'll talk to her. I have met the coolest people in the last few weeks in saunas, at yoga. Like, you've no idea where I connect with people and then say, well, we have a cup of tea or we meet again the next time. And it is from those conversations so much of my career has happened. And it was not in the job application or, an AI bot refusing my CV. It is at this stage, if you are over 35 and you've already done 10 years work, and if you're over 45 and you've done more than 20 years work, it is in the who and where are they now, and how maybe on some level you admire them, you enjoyed working with them, they might know someone. And those cups of tea and coffee that you have now, you do not know where they're going to lead to. And again, do not put a timeline on them. The number one thing I say about those things, about, getting out there and meeting people, is the always offer, what can I do for you? So often, and I put this in the context of myself, I'm asked to meet people. And firstly, I'm not always available now, but I will do a call with somebody, certainly. And, there's always that 15-minute call in my diary that I can give to someone where I can't meet them because my diary is just so insane right now, which is a really good complaint. I'm not complaining. But people, let's say, that have the power to meet you and it's on corporate time that they can meet you, which is even better again, right? They're not seeing, they're not like down to the wire, that on some level that you always say, what can I do for you? It's an exchange and you got to keep that balance of exchange going. There's one thing I want to add at this point as well around the stuckness piece. I want to go back to that because I feel I went off topic there for a moment. This idea that when you start forcing clarity where there's lack of clarity or confusion, that creates a kind of falseness of, and I see it with people of like, oh, I think I'm going to go and do this course because they've met one person and it feels a good logical move. But when they talk about it, like their heart sinks. Like that's always the information for me. I know it by the body. Like I can tell immediately by the body where they've made a decision on the next move, but it's because somebody else told them to, or they thought it was they were forcing that clarity in the point, and it wasn't. And again, it feels like that's hypocritical to say go meet people and ask them what they want to do, but I'm talking about you haven't met anyone for months. You met this one person that said you should go and do XYZ. and you've gone after that path because you think that's the right thing to do, as opposed to using a little bit of discernment and actually ask the body. Because I had somebody yesterday ask me, they're deciding between 3 different breathwork teachers who they were going to choose. But the minute they started talking, they already had made the choice. I knew by their body language. And I just pointed that out to them. And I also knew the character they were and the 3 teachers they were talking about. And I was like, it's so obvious which one is the right person. But that's for me, right? That's, I can see patterns and things in people that they can't even see for themselves. And that is just the work that I do. But I also can see relief in people when they've made a choice. So that is the role of the coach, right? To help you have discernment on your choices. But like, a coach should not be forcing you to get into a place of clarity either. Like, you do just need that time. So the way forward is, and again, it's like I feel like a drum roll at this point, and I'm like holding my own breath. So I'm just noticing, what am I doing here? The way forward in a transition, and this is the magic here, is focusing on the next obvious step. And the next obvious step in this transition could be what I've just said there: meeting XYZ for a coffee, going to a class that I've never done anything. The brain is seeking out novelty, like something new, like a pottery class, something random that you've never done. You never know who you're going to meet. I had somebody today tell me that they met somebody along the way on some course, and the person was like, hey, do you want to come and work for me? So like, it's not, sometimes it wasn't the course at all that opened the gate, but it's like, seek out places that you are not normally in. That's where we often have an encounter or this kind of eureka moment. Like, if you walk in a park every day and it's the same route and you even walk in the same direction, I would really, really, really advise you to, if you can't find a different park, walk in the different direction, walk on a different path, take a different route, do something unique as your next obvious step. So the obvious steps are, like, the brain, it's a brilliant NLP question, like, what would be useful here? And sometimes it's, I need more investigation on this topic, or I'm going to have a chat with the owner or the director of this course, or whatever it is. If it is a learning requirement, is the next thing. I'm going to shadow somebody, like, depending on the discipline. Like, could I, like, the days of like just transition your work experience are gone. Like, there's nothing wrong with anyone going, can I come and work for you for a week and see what it would be like? You know, like, that's like, if you're somebody who learns by doing, I have clients at the moment that are considering things like death doula is a conversation that I've had. I have a good few people who are burning desire to be writers full time. And they're having those obvious next steps, but thinking about it. But again, I'm giving them the feedback that it's really obvious of like where they need to take that obvious next step. So that's what you focus on. You don't need the full picture right now. You don't need to know the full step. I think if I knew about 2025 when I left in 2023, I wouldn't have become self-employed. I had a tough year in business last year, right? I've talked about it here. But I didn't need to see the full picture. I would never have done this, right? So this clarity, or this, all the steps being revealed, it would have ran the other way. And I'm not saying not to do what I've done. I'm saying is, I did absolutely the right thing at the time, and I've taken all the right steps along the way. I couldn't at any time only have done my best. That's all I could do. So what you can control is really, really important, and what you can't control. And there's a shit ton that you can't control. In fact, most things you can't. So the things you cannot control and I'm hoping this episode is not like oh Jesus, I'm not going to do this thing. And maybe that's the clarity you need, but I really hope that it is much more empowering, that the things you can't control, there is no such thing as a guaranteed outcome. You cannot have these kind of pivotal kind of timelines. You can have the next timeline, the next pivotal moment that you need, but hard to have the next ones after that. You cannot control other people. 0, 0, 0, 0. Even my clients, Nor do I want to. I don't want to have control over them. And the guarantees again, what we talked about earlier. There is no guarantee, but it's the trying. Somebody said to me again today, when they had a recent diagnosis, something around like regret. That was the biggest thing. The regret of the things that weren't going to get done. And if that person had not done them because he was waiting for a guarantee, just wouldn't have gotten done. So this idea that that could hold you back is certainly something that is definitely needs to be named and put place for. Think about the systems that you've been in, whether that was education, even your home. Who was the person at home that always wanted to know what was ahead of them? So whether it was planning the day, planning a holiday, that they needed to know that something was on every day, and just check. Maybe you're being really loyal to that person, mother, father, elder sibling, that had that like fixed idea that they needed to know, and that you feel that you also do. And maybe that part of that isn't yours. And yes, there's part of us that likes that control. The things you can control. Let's go positive on this one. The things that you can control in a transition is the pace. I took my time. I did not rush. I graduated as a coach in 2018 and I didn't begin my business till 2023. Right. So I had 5 years. That was and actually, truth be told, I'm still in my transition. Somebody asked me, how long have you had your business? And I was like, well, I've nearly completed my 3 years, not quite. And how long were you in corporate? 22 years. So you're really only starting out. I'm like, yes, I am still in my transition. I think this idea that like the end line, I think I was lulled into that false insecurity that the minute that I registered my limited business, that I was at the end line of the transition, and you're not. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. Change is no longer a one-off event. So knowing that this journey that you're making, and that's the fatigue, that's like, oh Jesus, I just want it to be done. I just want to know, that is not going to help you, right? It's going to be the pace of your transition, the pace of the change. Maybe, and this is where I get a lot of people, is the next step to better is maybe a job in a different environment doing what you are already skilled at. And while you're in that job, that you're going to get a chance to maybe do a course or try out something else. And that's where that comes back to the next obvious step, and the immediate industry change or the immediate reskilling isn't there, but there is some stability and there's maybe more space than you might have had in the job that you're currently in. The other thing you can control in a transition is boundaries. And I think you really need to be clear on those, because if you have really a North Star and you do know the direction of travel and you do know where you want to go, there's times where you're going to have to say no. You're going to have to say no to things that you might actually want to do. I had a lot of that for years. There's so many things that I missed. Do I have some regrets? For sure. But and this is the cost of my transition. What does it cost me to be still here? And I say that with still such surprise. Watching where your attention goes to. So comparison is a really big one. It's really big, particularly with my peers in self-employed life, where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other coaches, other consultants, other advisors that I consider peers. That if I only focus on what they're doing, how could I focus on the direction of travel I want to go in? So watching the comparisons, like, and this is where Instagram is toxic for like comparatitis, like, oh, look at their lives and look what they've got going on. And I think that really is not at all helpful at all. Like, this is really American term, swim in your own lane. But like, it's so key. Where do you want to focus to? What's this next step that you're focusing on? Focus there, not on what anybody else is doing, or not of the worst case scenario, because these are the self-fulfilling prophecies that we have to be really careful. Yeah, what are you moving towards? Like, if freedom is the thing you want, you got to start feeling some freedom in your body right now. You got to feel that spaciousness. You got to find places to feel that thing that you want further down the line, but you want to know what that feels like in your body now. And that is why any body work, anything that gets you out of your head and back into your body while you're in a transition phase, whether that's yoga, whether that's breath work, whether that's somatics, whether that's dancing, anything that moves you back into this understanding what your body enjoys and what really, really, really gives you that full nervous system grounding. That's what you want to focus on, because that's going to help you get more and more of that feeling, right? This is the physics and the science behind this. So focusing on what you can control is that next step that we spoke about, that next best step. That's what's so, so obvious. I am going to give you in this next phase 4 ground rules for transition that are going to help you. They're going to be really practical and absolutely no fluff. So, some guiding, I would say, principles versus rules. Not a fan of rules. So, guiding principles to help you, really practical things that can really help you as you navigate this transition. So, the first one is making peace with imperfection. There is no such thing as perfection in a transition. You're not going to have those clean lines and obvious ways to move every day. And if you're waiting for it to be perfect, you're not going to get going. You're never going to make a move. And there's something big in the deep work of this loyalty to getting it right. And that's the role of the systemic coach and the work that I do with people, checking where that loyalty comes from to get it right. And it could be schooling. It could be some of, I work with people who've been accountants their whole life. And if they got it wrong, they got fired. So if they're making a transition, there's this idea that, I have got to get it right. And that's going to be really, really hard to have momentum with perfection. And you gotta, done is better than perfect. And I think this podcast is a perfect example of that I would never bother recording anything if I didn't really get into the whole truth of that it's done is better than perfect. Even my Instagram, like, my God, like, I'm the classic dyslexic, so many bad spellings often, but I'd rather post than not post at all, and then keep you all engaged and keep, providing something useful. So, waiting to feel ready will delay the momentum if you're waiting for perfection. The next one is go gentler than you think you should. The idea of gentleness towards yourself, or self-compassion. This is really, really, really important. Like, so many times where in my mind I decided, like, they don't like me, or this isn't working, and I was just being so hard on myself. And I realized most of it was nothing got to do with me, and that actually what I was missing in that moment was this being gentle with myself and being, having some self-compassion. And, we've spoken about this before. The idea of being kind to yourself is so much easier than the word self-compassion, which meant nothing to me as a child. So how could I just lean back, take a break, catch a breath, and that, judging that this gentleness that I need is not a weakness. Like, it's so important as I navigate a transition that I really, really need to be tender with myself and go gently, as I like to say. The next one is to stay anchored and grounded in today. That's all you have. What can I do today? What's in my sphere of control that is within my influence that I can carefully and confidently manage today? Transitions are navigated one day at a time. And for those of us that love a good plan, myself included, that is hard. That's hard. But that's the great thing about a goal, is that you can work backwards. And you do this with fitness. Why is it any different with you and your career and what you want to do? So there is that idea that, what can I focus on today? And then when today is done, what's tomorrow? I've definitely in my last few years got way better at that. When I run ahead of myself or overly plan or overly project, I lose sight of what's important in my day. And I had a brilliant coach who like is really good at like in her diary focusing on my number one thing today has to be stability. And in order for stability to happen, I need to make enough money that I don't need to worry about end of month, etc. So that's really, really, really important. Um, the last one and the most critical is the choose self-respect over fear. So fear has a tendency to rush because it's false evidence appearing as real. And fear makes us panic. And in the panic, we're like, we're wanting it more, we're wanting it faster. And when that dilutes any bit of respect that we have for ourselves. And the self respect also includes kind of celebrating and recognizing how far you've come. Because you might be on this podcast because you've dreamed of transition, but in reality, you've probably been transitioning somewhat for the last few years. Certainly since COVID has been that real expediter of change, along with AI, along with all the other fast moving geopolitical things that are happening in the world, that the credit and the self respect of, I've already been doing a really good job here. I'm doing as well as I can be right now, and have that respect for the skills, your experience. None of that goes away. So much of what you have can be taken into what you want to do next on your terms. And I think that's the important. That respect for yourself calms everything down and goes, I actually am right where I'm meant to be, and it's going to come from this space. And that is a really, really, really critical one. So we're going to go through the four just as a summary again. So making peace with imperfection is the first one. The second one is go gentler than you think you should. So slowing things down is a way of regulating, being gentle with yourself. This is not a weakness. Third one is stay anchored in today. Stay present with all that you can control within the day. The transition is navigated in the day. And finally, that one, choose self-respect over fear. They were the four. And as we round into and coming towards the end of this podcast and things that are really, really helpful, how you move forward without any of that certainty, because the certainty is not going to come, is we talked about owning where you are right now, calling it out. I'm in a transition phase. This is where I am. I feel confused, overwhelmed. Name what those are. Own it. Take that power back. Stop fighting the phase. Like sometimes it's I have been fighting my own transition phase, especially because somewhere along the way the ego got in the way and was like, oh yeah, no, I'm the other side of this. Like I'm out of corporate and I'm in here. I'm still, the most humbling thing I've done in these last few months is like I'm still in a transition, and I will be for another while yet. I'm not done here. My evolution is still happening all the time. And there's so much change. Already my business has changed. My ideal clients are changing. All of that is changing all the time. So I'm still in the transition. Nothing is grounded. And I don't know if it ever will be. Right. So maybe for the rest of my career I will be in a transition. Who knows? But I'm certainly getting used to the uncertainty and resourcing myself for that uncertainty. Regulate yourself, come back to the body before a decision has to be made. And I'm talking about those incremental everyday decisions. Like when you start talking, a really good one is like recording your voice for something and listening to your voice back and hearing the intonation and the tonality of where you're at, right? So that is really, really, really key of finding where that kind of obvious information lies. So, does my heart feel more energy? Does my gut say no? Where is my head at? Checking in with your three principal brains, head, heart, and gut, before making those kind of bigger decisions, I would say. Take the next obvious step. We spoke about it earlier. I'm sure one was coming to mind. Take action on that one and celebrate it when you have, because your body will want to do more then, as opposed to berating yourself because you didn't take it, or berating yourself because you took a wrong one, because there is no right or wrong. Reassess after, maybe it's this week, we're into like if you're hearing this around early 2026, have a point in time. So have that pacing in mind and say, well, a month from now, I'm going to reassess did I do anything? Did I take any of the actions that I said I was, the most obvious one, and what came after that? And how am I doing with the consistency of showing up for what I want? And that was one thing that when I was training, because I was spending money on my education, I could consistently see the growth all the time. And it was funny, there was a year or two where I paused on like learning and I just wanted to integrate, and the integration was so needed. And then when I started doing courses again, I could see the up leveling again, but I really needed the integration. And I think 2026 is going to be partly an integration year with some learning throughout, for sure. But being really discerning on what the learning is now, that I don't need another course to make me feel whole, that most of what I have already is more than enough for what's coming in this phase. So bring it back to, you're in a transition and you're unsure, but you're not broken. This is no way in reflecting on you. This is a desire. You are a product of a fast moving world, and your desire to want something different, more purposeful. You're really in the middle of something that's really real, and only you know what that feels like. And I know that sometimes can be a place that can be very, very alone. Own that where you are and take your power back. Stop blaming anybody else for the reasons why you want to change, and know deep down that you have a greater why. That's really, really important. Take the obvious next step. And that's really absolutely enough for now. As I said before, we're going to be following this up with a body scan. And within that body scan is going to be really about coming back to the heart as a principled brain that knows. The heart knows before anything else does. The gut has its intuition as well. And the head, how important all this is. And we're going to bring through a whole body scan and meditation that will really allow you to center and come back and figure out what's important in this transition time. I am so grateful for your listens. It means the absolute world to me. My podcast has always been a little creative space that I love to make time for when the moment feels right, and do these significant podcasts that are useful to people. I'm not somebody who records weekly. That is not within my DNA. I love novelty and difference, and I love coming up with episodes that are useful, because more than anything else, that's where I find my purpose. Once I'm useful, then I feel more that I have a sense of belonging and the purpose in the work that I do. I want to share also as well that I have a spring series called the Slow Spring Project for those that are listening in real time. In starting, the first call is on the 8th of February. It's Sunday nights, 8 to 9:30. There are 3 calls in total in February, March and April. And you can check it out on my Instagram, on my link tree, and you'll see the page to register. It is such good value, because not only is it the calls, there is wisdom and top tips kind of shared within a WhatsApp community, and a lovely community forming there. Many of us have been through the Wintering Project already together, and it has been a really unexpected gift. Again, if you had told me this time last year that I'd be doing them, I certainly didn't. I integrate things like Celtic seasonal wisdom along with really, really practical, along with my meditation and breath work. And it's just a lovely space. And if you don't get to listen to it live on Sunday night, that's absolutely fine. You can listen back, and everything is recorded. So I am going to round up this podcast, and thank you all for listening. Please, 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 my request is that you rate and review, whether it's on Spotify, Apple or YouTube. Please like this. Please share it with somebody else that you know that's going through a really challenging transition, and they're worried or stuck or confused, overwhelmed. I hope this episode has been really, really practical to you or anyone you know and love. Thank you. A huge thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Norm. And I'd love for you to rate and review and share all your comments and your questions, whether Spotify or Apple, are so welcome to keep somebody as small as myself to keep going on this path and sharing my experience, that as a way of being your next step. If you're hitting on that I'm your next step, that this is helpful, I offer coaching. I'm based out of Dublin, but I offer online coaching throughout the world. And I'd love to be able to walk with you, not ahead of you, not behind you, but walk with you as you make this decision, as you transition and something new is emerging. Go gently for now, and thanks so much for watching.